Ashley. I'm the Director of Communications for the Lobeck-Taylor Family Foundation, and I just wanted to welcome you all to this event and thank you for showing so much support. We at the foundation really feel like the appetite for social enterprise has grown so much in the Tulsa community, even just in the last year. So we hope that you enjoy this event that we put together, and please take time, if you didn't get to on your way in, to visit the social enterprises that are here. I'm sure Natalie will tell you a little bit about them, but we're really grateful that they could be here. We also have two of our board members in the house tonight, Kathy Taylor and Bill Lobeck, so thanks you guys for everything that you do for the foundation. So we at LTFF are so very lucky today, not just because we have an amazing social enterprise expert in the house, but we also have a resident social enterprise expert with our Director of Grants and Impact, Natalie Joyschley. Thanks for doing this, Natalie. And it was Natalie's idea to bring in Ibada Wadud, who is here all the way from New York City, and she has such a breadth of expertise in this area, and we are just so grateful that she's here to take all of her best practices and challenges to share why social enterprise really can make a difference in Tulsa and best practices on how to make yours run well. So thanks for being here, Ibada.
Thank you for having me.
And I am going to kick it to Natalie to start.
Hey, thank you, Ashley. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I've never been to Tulsa.
She said Tulsa is very cute.
It is very cute. I feel like I already have a heart connection, though, because I used to sing. Oh. It is on. There's a green light.
Here's coming. It's on. He's going to turn it
No
up.
worries. I used to teach a lot, so I can just speak loudly. But I was saying that I feel like I already have a heart connection to Tulsa because I grew up in preschool singing This Land Is Your Land. So it's nice to be here.
Yeah. It's really nice that you're here. So I just want to read a little bit about Ibada and her bio so you can have some background on her. So Ibada joined the Kate Spade On Purpose team in 2016, and she manages production, manufacturing, and global trade and compliance for Kate Spade On Purpose collection. This includes managing the production cycle from concept to distribution in partnership with design, merchandising, buying, planning, and logistics. In addition to partnering with Kate Spade's Rwanda-based supplier and on-purpose vendors across Europe and Asia. Prior to Kate Spade, Ibada partnered with women artisans in Peru to create an independent accessories label featuring luxury handcrafted goods. Her label was featured in Southern Living magazine and at the Stanford University Global Entrepreneurship Summit in the U.S. Department of State. While managing her label, Ibada taught a summer course in social entrepreneurship for rising undergraduates at Yale University from 2010 to 2014. Ibada's education in fashion includes a residency with luxury Italian menswear brand where she spent 9 months in Italy exploring sustainable manufacturing. She has particularly focused on artisan communities throughout her career with a concentration on economic development. This includes work at the Aspen Institute's Alliance for Artisan Enterprise from 2013 to 2014, which is where Ibada and I met. We met in a very sweaty, dark intern room with no windows.
It's true.
So it's cool to be here with you now in this nice room. And in 2016, Ibada resumed her education, participating in the Institute for Design and Public Policy at Rhode Island School of Design, a program co-hosted by the U.S. Department of State. So she's obviously really incredible, and we're so lucky to have her here and share her expertise with us. So
Just realized that made me sound pretty old.
No.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's just get started and talk about how you got involved with social enterprise.
Sure. I have some notes here because I want to make sure I just hit on some points for everyone, and then of course we'll have the Q&A. I think this is still not working.
It just sounds really quiet.
But anyways, I can just start sort of from the beginning. So I studied human rights in undergrad. I wanted to study fashion, but I grew up doing a lot of service, and I was equally passionate about community service and social justice, so that's the direction I took, with some arm twisting, I would say, when I was younger. And I ended up also working from there in international development. And then I spent about 4 years in Spain. After I graduated, I took a fellowship teaching in a rural community in southern Spain through the Ministry of Education and Culture. And that was sort of the foundation for my work in international development and learning about economic and social development. And then I later also spent a year in Tanzania doing similar work, about 3 hours, I think, from any major city, which was a really interesting experience. So that was sort of the beginning. And the reason that I actually learned about social enterprise, I think at the time when I was starting to work in social enterprise, I don't know that I necessarily knew that that's what I was doing. I just kept going back to the passion that I had for fashion and the creative industry. And that, to me, in my mind and in my imagination, took shape as a kind of business model. And so I wanted to understand, how could I marry this passion that I have for fashion and also continue to do the work that I loved in human rights and community service? So, you know, if I rewind, when I was in undergrad, I had studied abroad in Ecuador. And I came across many artisan communities there. I worked with women a lot. I volunteered at a prison. I was volunteering in communities all over the country. And I realized that artisans were very involved in commerce and relying on commerce to sustain their livelihoods. And so thinking back to that time, I thought, what if there were a way to create a commercial brand that people could actually really relate to, that was helping artisans, but also, you know, fashion forward and was a business. And so, to me, that was something. It was something very specific, but essentially, it was a social enterprise. And from there, I kind of forayed into other areas of social enterprise and began to educate myself about the sector in general.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, can you also share with us what your role is now at Kate Spade and what that involves, and how did you get there?
Sure. It was a journey. So my work at Kate Spade, I work on a specific label called On Purpose. So if you go to katespade.com, and you can find it sort of in our product, one of our product categories, there's a collection called On Purpose. On Purpose is a division at Kate Spade that sits under our corporate social responsibility department. But like I said, we're also a commercial label. And so all of the product is produced in Rwanda. There are about 200 artisans working with us in Rwanda. 98% of those employees are women. And for the most part, all of the people working with us have experienced the genocide. So for those of you who aren't aware, first of all, Rwanda is located in East Africa. And in the early 90s, there was a devastating genocide that took place. Most people in Rwanda that are around my age or older experienced the genocide. And so the work that we're really doing is not only about providing employment, but also about creating a safe space for people where they can really begin to heal from the experience that they had.
Wow, I always forget the depth of that project.
Yeah, and I can talk also a little bit more to answer your question, Natalie, about the actual work that I'm doing in my day-to-day in New York. I do travel to Rwanda a couple of times a year. I was last there in October. But when I'm in New York, I'm working cross-functionally with a lot of partners, and it's business as usual. And I'm working with merchandising partners, I'm working with design. So at the beginning of a season when we get a concept, I'm sitting there with design, figuring out, all right, can we make a business case for this? And if we can make a business case for this, then okay, how are we going to put it into production? And that's sort of where I sit on our team. And once it's produced, okay, how is it getting to you and you and you? And then, you know, how are we engaging you in the store? So it really is the full arc of the experience, which is why I actually really like the work that I do. So yeah.
Cool. And then could you maybe give us a little bit of a picture of what the impact has been of Kate Spade On Purpose going into Rwanda and the communities that it's working with?
Absolutely. So each year we actually, so one thing I can say is that there's the commercial aspect of the work that we do, but there's also a philanthropic aspect. And I think the marriage between those two things is extremely important. And so the philanthropic aspect is that we do a couple of things. One of the things that we do is there's something called Shop with Purpose. And so we have a sale. You'll receive an email if you're on our listserv. And if you buy a product, a certain percentage of that, I think 25% of that, is contributed to On Purpose, right? And to benefit the community that works with On Purpose in Rwanda. So that's one way that we use commercial dollars. And then we also, for philanthropic purposes, and then we also have an employee fundraiser every year, which is extremely fun. A lot of our employees, we're really lucky to be able to do this. It's a very fun and creative workplace. And so a lot of our employees say that it's their favorite time of year. But we host a fundraiser at our offices. It's just for employees. We play lots of games. We play trivia. We do all kinds of really fun things. And then the money that's raised is also donated to the community. And the impact is really just being able to fund an important community impact project each year. So we've built playgrounds in Masoro, which is the name of the village where we work in Rwanda. We've this past year funded a sport and learning center that's going to be built. We've done a health center that is pretty massive for the community that it's actually serving. If you look at it at scale, it's a pretty incredible project. And all of these things are possible because our customers are out there buying handbags.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So before Kate Spade, you started your own social enterprise called Run by Rule with artisans in Ecuador.
In Peru.
Sorry, in Peru. You said Ecuador.
Inspired by my work in Ecuador.
Okay, there you go. So can you tell us how Run by Rule got started and some challenges you experienced in running Run by Rule?
Sure. Run by Rule, again, it goes back to that idea of how can I marry these two things that I'm very passionate about. And I knew that in order to do that, I was going to have to learn a lot and that I couldn't just go in blindly. And I think that's actually something really important that hopefully we can speak about a little bit later, is not parachuting into communities to say, I have an idea and this is what I want to do, but really educating yourself and ensuring that you're doing that responsibly. So I knew from a sort of business standpoint that I would just have to learn the industry, at least to, have a year of an experience at a company or a couple of years really understanding what it meant to work in the fashion industry in order to be able to operate a business, but also to have experience in that community or in that region so that I had some sense of what the actual human need was. So having experience in Ecuador was sort of why I chose Peru. I didn't want to sort of, close my eyes and just point to a place on a map, but I wanted to go somewhere where I felt like I was familiar, I could connect with the community. And also having spent 4 years in Spain, I spoke Spanish, and so I felt like it was a way for me to connect with the community. But in terms of preparing myself from a business standpoint, I spent a year in Italy. So I had worked at that point in global education and international development for about probably 4 or 5 years. I was already in Europe. I was working in Spain, as I said, and I thought, if I'm going to pivot, this is probably the time to pivot and really see what potential is there. And so I applied for an artist residency in Italy to work with a menswear brand called Zegna. It's I think known in the industry, but also pretty obscure because it's just so obscenely expensive. But the with reason, it's all made very, very sustainably, and there's a lot of work that goes into making those clothing. And so I was really lucky to be mentored by Anna Zegna, who's the director of the foundation that they have, which funded my residency, and also I don't want to get this wrong. She's involved in the business side as well.
Okay.
And so that was really great. I did ask her, as I was working on my project, which was focused on sustainability in luxury fashion specifically, what are your thoughts on sustainability? Is it important to really focus on that and market that? And her thinking was really more along the lines of, if it's baked into the business model, if it's baked into what you're doing every day, you don't necessarily need to market it or sell it. It just is part of the business. And so that was very, very inspiring to me, and I knew that that's the path and the sort of ideology, you could say, that I wanted to follow. But it was a great practical experience for me. I spent a lot of time in mills all over Italy, going to Milan Fashion Week, and just really getting a sense of what was out there and what the possibilities were. And it was actually also through Zegna, because they work with a lot of sustainable raw materials, that I found out about access to a wealth of resources in terms of raw materials that were available in Peru. And so it just made sense for me. And I think a year later, I was on a plane moving to Peru.
And can you tell us about the products that you made with Run by Rule?
Sure. So we primarily focused on, I really wanted to focus on an existing skill set. And I knew that that's how we would best sort of, for the model that we were creating, that was how best we could succeed. And so there's a very strong and long tradition and heritage of weaving Panama hats in Peru. Actually, Panama hats are not made in Panama. They're made in Ecuador and Peru and Colombia. So fun fact. And in Peru, it's actually, you could say, quote unquote, a dying craft. It's much more prevalent in Ecuador, and so that was something else that I felt strongly about, was, in a way to sort of support some kind of restoration or revival of this craft in that area. And also the fact that all of the, or I would say probably 99% of the artisans who were working in weaving were women, and that was sort of something that was really important to me. So that's sort of how I chose that community, how I got there, and how I chose the product. And then once we spent about probably 2 years just focusing on a very specific, simple product line, we then also layered on top of that handbags, and that was how I got my handbag experience.
Wonderful. And can you share with us some of the challenges that you face in starting that and
Oh, sure.
all along the way?
I can say it in one word, capital, capital, and capital.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was really challenging. I found I got really creative, so that was good.
Ibada is probably the most resourceful woman that I know.
Reached out to a lot of people in my network, reached out to people who I didn't know, reached out to people who I did know. But essentially I had to just get the business going and say, okay, like, I've got to take the risk and turn a profit, and then it's going to start to sort of pay for itself. And that's sort of how it worked. And I think there's not one way to do that, but I can say that that was definitely challenging. And also just the market is completely saturated. So how do you stand out? How do you make people pay attention to you? And for me, it was about telling an authentic story. Not only about the work that I was doing in Peru with that community, but also sort of my story. And so I really related to the work that they were doing and felt strongly about it because of my upbringing and my own family heritage. My family is from rural North Carolina. There's a strong tradition of textiles and craftsmanship, and so I kind of told that story. And it was a sort of a parallel storytelling, you could say, and that really resonated. And I focused on a very specific target audience. So my target audience was the American South. And I wanted to reach that audience. I knew that the product would appeal to that customer. And so, I set goals, and one of those goals was gotta get in Southern Living if you want to reach the American South. Gotta get in. Name your publication, name your outlet, and so that was sort of my approach. It was very specific and focused, which I think is sort of a trend in my story. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've had so many incredible experiences, but they've all tied together so well. Okay, so how did you make the decision to leave Run by Rule and take your current role with Kate Spade? Because I know that you were so passionate about Run by Rule because you were running it also when we were working together at the Aspen Institute. Yeah.
Yes. Probably the most difficult decision I've had to make. but also one that made sense, because when I looked at the work that we were doing, and even from the beginning, I knew that I wanted this business to be able to stand on its own 2 legs. I wanted the community that I was working with to have agency and to have buy-in and to feel like they were responsible for its success. And so at a certain point, I felt like they were ready. They felt like they were ready. And that's sort of how it happened. I felt like sort of there was an expiration date, and that was, it was tough, because I think it's, for every entrepreneur, or founder or creator, it's hard to let go of those things, especially your first, initiative or your first project. But I had many things that I wanted to still learn about the industry, and I wanted to continue to seek out new opportunities. And so, in that sense, it was an easy decision to make.
Okay, and so the project is still
So
live, and the women are still making your products
yes.
and have access to markets.
Their products.
Their
yes.
products, sorry.
They are, and that was something that was really important in setting the foundation of the social enterprise, was ensuring that they really were taking ownership of the business responsibilities, right? So yes, I'm a facilitator. Yes, I'm going to train you. We had fellows coming in from amazing places, from business schools and fashion schools, you name it. We had them there in Peru. At the end of the day, it was I think it was just something that they were really actually excited to do.
Yeah.
It's still going. And I feel like every time I talk to Juana or whoever I'm connecting with from the business, they feel really, really proud that they are the ones running the business. And they've been set up for success, and that was really important to me.
Yeah.
So they are running all of those business relationships and those retail partnerships in the US, which is awesome.
That is awesome. So, having talked a little bit about your experience of developing a social enterprise and seeing the impacts that you've seen in the community, can you just share with the audience what you think the importance is of social enterprise in a community?
Sure, absolutely. I think that in terms of social enterprise, or really any business, but particularly socially responsible businesses, it's about being transformers, right? So transforming problems into opportunities. So yes, there's a problem and you identify that problem. Not only is it about finding the solution, but I think it's what is the opportunity here, and being able to shed light on that and expose that to your community, I think is really the role of social enterprise. And so that's something that I try to practice in my work every day, but I do think that that's how I would summarize it, is really just transforming problems into opportunities, and I think that's how communities evolve and transform.
So, knowing that Tulsa is such a philanthropic community, what do you think the opportunity is for social enterprise versus starting another nonprofit? Not that one or the other is better or worse, but
right, exactly. I think social enterprise is unique because, I'm very passionate about business, but I think that nonprofits and businesses have to work together. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, my main challenge was capital, right? So what does it look like when, for example, family foundations are funding social entrepreneurs, right? And sort of the power of that possibility. I think that's really, really critical. In terms of specifically social enterprise, I think it's really about sharing resources and best practices as well, because you can't learn everything. You can't figure everything out. And so you need to be able to create partnerships. And I think even for me, in Peru, I had a lot of nonprofit partnerships, including academic institutions, that were really, really critical to the success of the business. You know, working with Parsons out of New York, or working even with cross-functionally with government. Like, I think it's very interdisciplinary, and so I think that relationship is really important. So I think existing, I don't think they can exist in silo, I would say. So I think each has a unique purpose.
Yeah.
I think the role of social entrepreneurs and social enterprises is to say, here's a product or a service, that you want, or that you've somehow demonstrated that you need, and we're going to find a responsible way to provide that to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are probably some aspiring social entrepreneurs in the crowd. Can you give them some advice if they are someone who's has an idea that they feel really passionate about, but maybe are having some trepidation of going forward and launching? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think it's really critical to ask people what they need. It's awesome to have an idea. I have so many ideas all the time. Like, it drives me nuts. Like, literally, it drives me nuts. But at the end of the day, like, if it doesn't have substance, if you're not applying it, like, an idea is just an idea. Right. And so you've got to get out there and engage with people and ask them what they need. And you could have the best idea and it could sound super sexy, but then if somebody's like, we don't, and Tulsa doesn't need that, you can't force it. So I think it's really, really important to ask people what they need and to be flexible and be willing to meet them halfway.
Okay, beautiful. And then what do you think are the most important resources for a community to have to be able to launch successful social enterprises?
That's a really good question.
You've mentioned capital, of course.
Capital, absolutely. Space, like, here we are.
Yeah.
I think this is an amazing example of what a space can do. And I love seeing cities all over the U.S., in unique and special spaces like this one. So thank you so much for the space, by the way.
Thank you, 36.
And, I would say also space as an opportunity for engagement, right? So it's not just having the space, but it's, are you cultivating opportunities for people to connect who maybe especially otherwise wouldn't be able to. I think that's really important.
Right. I know that that's something that we think about with 36 Degrees North too, is that we have an amazing population of people coming in, and we have really great numbers, but we need to keep on working on reaching out into different areas of Tulsa. So I know that that's a way that we're trying to grow this year as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important, the engagement piece. And I would say even a step further, and one of the challenges that I think a lot of people experience also in my case is be inclusive. It's not an exclusive community. It's not a special club. Everyone is allowed to be involved. Everyone should have the opportunity to be involved. And it's really important to hear everyone's insights and experiences so that you can represent that. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, so I'm the Director of Grants and Impact at Lowbeck Taylor Family Foundation, and we talk a lot about impact, therefore. And so can you talk a little bit about the importance of impact in social enterprise and what your thoughts are on how you should maybe measure that and manage that process?
Yeah.
Feel free to answer that question however you want.
I mean, we measure our impact at Kate. Absolutely. We work with partners on the ground locally to do that. I measured our impact when I was in Peru as well with Run by Rural. I think,
what did that look like at Run by Rural? What were your metrics, or what were the things that you were interested in learning about and making an impact?
I think there was, and I think this is common with socially responsible businesses, right? Looking at sustainability as a model, and I think one of the really prevalent models is like that triple bottom line, right? So social, environmental, economic, right? And like impact in those areas. One of the and I digress a little bit, but I will just say that, at that time, I was really concerned about making sure that all of those bases were covered. And I don't think that's necessarily as important as you might think. I think you can't be everything to everyone, but if your business model is representative of that, then you should be measuring that. Mm-hmm. In my case, it was. There was an environmental impact in that we were sourcing locally, so we wanted to be able to measure that. We were, creating our own dyes, for example, as well. So, what kind of impact did that have? Economically, we were creating jobs. What was the ripple effect in, in the community at the family level, Mm-hmm. And socially, which I think is probably the most difficult, impact to measure. Mm-hmm. How do you measure someone's confidence level? How do you measure, these sort of more abstract, intangible things? But I don't think it always necessarily is represented in numbers. I think there's other ways to measure as well. And I think that's why it's so important to ask those really important and sometimes difficult questions so that you can hear from the people who you're actually aiming to serve. But yeah, and I would also say about measuring impact, go in, with a totally open mind and be prepared for anything and to learn anything about the communities that you're working with, as opposed to saying, okay, this is the desired outcome I have, and then trying to sort of work backwards from there. I think it's just going in with a clean slate is really important.
Okay, so I have a question then. So,
sure.
Something that I think, and I'm curious if you agree with me or not, I think that something that distinguishes a socially responsible business and a true social enterprise that's trying to solve a social issue is that they've identified a really specific issue that they want to solve in a community, and then they have data that they will use to measure their success. Do you agree with that, or is that too rigid?
No, I think that's part of business. I think that's just part of business. I think, you need evidence to support any claim that you're making. Mm-hmm. And so I do think that's really important. I would say, I definitely agree.
Okay.
It's important.
Okay, so I'm not being too hard on it.
No, I don't think so. I think you've got to have the evidence.
Right? It's like if we're going to try and do this, we might as well really.
Yeah, I mean, before I went into the community in Peru, I think we spent probably 3 months going from household to household, surveying community members, mm-hmm. gathering data, information, filming, writing notes. It was a lot of research and data mm-hmm. that we gathered before mm-hmm. we even piloted.
And is that where you talk about it having interdisciplinary partners of?
Absolutely, mm-hmm. absolutely. I think that's really, 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 really critical. I think, if you want to do something responsibly, you're gonna have to work with other people.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, well, I will turn it to the audience then. I know that there's a lot of people here who have their own social enterprise or just interested. So
great.
We'll pass the mic around. We'll start taking questions now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the questions.
Yeah.
Questions for Ibada or Natalie? Or me?
Thank you very much for that. My question is, for Ibada,
sure.
Are there any challenges or pitfalls that are specific to trying to start a social enterprise that services or involves a community outside your own, and particularly people in a least developed or less developed country?
One more time.
Are there any challenges or pitfalls that are specific to when you have a social enterprise ambition that involves either a supply chain or operations that are in another community to the one that you're a direct part of yourself, particularly a less developed or least developed country?
Okay, I think I got that. So I would say that so communities outside of the ones that you're particularly working in that have pitfalls or challenges that you've experienced that are impacting the work that you're doing?
More, if you're trying to get a social enterprise going,
Yeah, sure. Share an anecdote. I think that would be helpful.
Communities outside your own, and particularly vulnerable communities, are there any things that can go wrong or things that you need to guard against in that process?
Okay, I got it. Sure. I think yes. I have a really good example of that actually. I know that the social enterprise which was actually a design firm, would be very happy for me to share. So I would say yes. Sorry that took me a moment. I did not sleep a lot last night, very early flight. But so I can say that I talked a little bit earlier about parachuting, right? Meaning that kind of saying like, oh, I want to solve this problem. I can identify a problem. There's an opportunity, and then sort of just going into a community without necessarily understanding fully the problem, right? So a really good example of that is there's an amazing, and I can say amazing because they definitely pivoted after learning a very hard lesson, design firm called Project H Design that I encourage anyone here to look up. Project H went, it was two designers, University of Chicago, brilliant designers, went to South Africa and said, all right, we want to solve two problems. There's a water problem, right, so access to water, and then there's also a health problem. Carrying water on your head creates health problems, right? We have an amazing design solution for both. And so it was something called the hippo roller. If you look it up, very brilliant design also. That essentially would allow you to roll the same amount of water that was being carried on the head with your hands, right? Designed it, invested in it, piloted it, and then just launched it. The problem was that they didn't ask anyone if they wanted to use the hippo roller. And so when they put these things into the community, mostly women who were carrying the water and walking, 5 miles that way or 2 miles, that way, were like, well, we have to carry our babies. We can't carry this hippo roller. Also, we're just used to carrying water on our head, and this is weird. So they took their hippo rollers back, wasted a ton of money, wasted a ton of time, and since then have pivoted and focused only on projects, one in the U.S., which that was their choice, and are doing amazing work in rural communities. Actually, one very close to where my family is from, originally in rural North Carolina. And also out in California in different areas. So I think parachuting, definitely. And I think also, it's 2018 and we can just do better, right? So, and we know better, and we have so much access to information that we can do things faster. And so it really does warrant, I think, more thought. And I think there's a greater responsibility to do that. So that's one example that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm also happy to talk to you more about that afterward.
Cool.
Amazing. We have another question.
Thank you for your nice presentation. In the United States, there is any special law for social enterprise comparing regular or in a state or something, or any incentive for social enterprise to consider it as a social enterprise, not a corporation?
That's a really good question.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure.
Yeah.
So in the U.S., are there specific, essentially legal guidelines, right, for social enterprises?
I think or incentives.
Or incentives. Okay, also a really good question. Thank you. I was actually hoping we would get to this. Yes, I would say the answer is yes. There are certain legal, I would say not guidelines per se, but there are legal entities that exist. And primarily they exist on a state-by-state, sort of case-by-case basis, right? So I registered Run by Rural in North Carolina, And North Carolina at the time had something that was very new that was being piloted in just a few different states. I think Illinois was another state, and I think New Hampshire was another one, called an L3C. So like an LLC, it was called an L3C. L3C, which since does not exist. And so I'll get to that. So that was their sort of social enterprise, legal social enterprise entity that you could register as. There were some incentives. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily as straightforward as like this is the monetary incentive that you get for X amount of sales dollars or revenue. It was more so like, or even really tax breaks necessarily, which is what I think made it so complicated. It wasn't a nonprofit, so you couldn't apply for grants, but it also wasn't an LLC. It wasn't a corporation, and so I think at a certain point, businesses were like, well, I'm going to just register as an LLC, or I'm going to register as a sole proprietorship, or whatever the case may be. But I still think there's value in that because I think it creates awareness, if anything. There's also, so that's just one example. There are other ones as well, but that's the one I'm most familiar with is the L3C. And then there's also an amazing organization. The B Corp is the actual entity or registration. Do you know the name of the actual business?
Of what it's called if you're B Corp registered?
Well, there's the business that actually oversees the B Corp registration, which I think is escaping me. It might actually be called B Corp. It is B Corp. And they're incredible. And there's a lot of value there. I'm not hugely familiar with all that they do, but I know that there's a very thorough vetting process for social enterprises. And I do think that there are some incentives, but unfortunately I don't know specifically what they are, so I can't really answer that. But I would definitely encourage you to, if you're interested, to look up B Corp. Because I would say at this time, it's probably the most longstanding, the most well-known, and therefore the most credible organization. Yeah.
Got it.
Excuse me, but B Corp, they have a giant organization, company like Nestle or something like this. So we can compare it, consider it as a social enterprise.
You said, is B Corp a giant entity? Like,
Yeah,
or do they register larger entities as social
It's a
enterprises?
large entity, so how we can consider it as a social enterprise?
I don't believe that they. Do they certify? I don't know if they certify. They might certify large corporations. I see what you're getting at. But I don't know if they certify in certain areas larger corporations, like you said, like Nestle or whomever. But I do know that if you want to create a business from its inception and register as a B corporation, you can do that, and there's a vetting process.
We have a question up front.
Hey there.
Hi.
I'm curious, with Kate Spade, have you been able to use the expertise of that company? Or I guess basically, going with his question as well, it's like you can start something yourself or you can leverage the expertise of existing organizations. And it seems like you're choosing to do the latter, where you're working with Kate Spade to do a social enterprise within it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I didn't mention before, aside from the sort of sustainability factor and truly wanting to see Run by Rural ownership sit with the community that it was serving, was that I really wanted to do work at scale to create a greater impact. And so that was also a big sort of motivation for me. In terms of using the work that I did in Peru at Kate, yeah, all the time, every day, I do. And it's really rewarding in that sense to sort of also know and be able to offer actually I tried that at a really small scale and it failed. So I'm gonna just offer this little nugget to you. Or just little things like that, I think very valuable, in addition to just having that initial experience on a smaller scale and learning very technical, intricate, and also sometimes bureaucratic processes you know, on a smaller scale, I think definitely prepares you to do that work at a larger scale. You know, Natalie was talking a little bit about some of the sort of day-to-day work that I do, and it's very heavy on the business side. You know, I have partners in Europe and I have partners in Asia, and I spend a lot of time communicating and facilitating processes in different regions of the world to ensure that certain business processes happen. And I think I'm better able to do that because I was able to do that at a smaller scale first.
I really appreciate that you can use the experience from before for what you're doing with Kate Spade, but I was trying to ask with Kate Spade if their expertise and resources are being leveraged with what you're doing within the company, if they're helping you to, does that make sense? Like, for instance, some this big corporations do corporate responsibility stuff that's outside of their area of expertise, but this seems very within Kate Spade's expertise. So how has that worked? Has that been good?
Yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely. It is very much within their expertise. I think that that was very intentional, I would say. And I can say also that our team is not only just the people on the corporate social responsibility team, but it's also you know, all of the cross-functional partners that we work with who make those contributions, and like we're able to leverage their experience and their knowledge to actually meet our goals and desired outcomes for On Purpose. So it's not just, okay, what is On Purpose doing in silo? It's like, all right, we need these people, we need these resources, and like it's really all hands on deck to make it work. And I would say that like similarly, that applies even in terms of product. So like we haven't really talked about product much, but I can say that it's one of the things I'm really passionate about. And I can say that, you know, we kind of have the same outlook as well there. And that's something that I really appreciate about Kate Spade and On Purpose as a label, is that we make a product, and when it hits the store, we want people to know that we're doing really great work in Rwanda. We want people to know that we're doing work that has a social mission. But we know that in order for them to understand that, and the only way that we can effectively communicate that is to make it very product-centric. And so what that means is spending a lot of time and being very thoughtful about the designs, and also making sure that the concepts and you know, the product itself is very integrated and looks and feels like Kate Spade, which is really, really critical. And I know for me also, I came in with that outlook from the brand that I was running in Peru. I went into that experience knowing that I wanted people to be attracted to the product first, because that to me felt like something that could then be sustainable. And then to sort of go like, oh, like, you know, it's like the icing on the cake, right? Like, wow, this has an impact. I'm doing something good. And so I would encourage, you know, that as well.
Cool. We have time for one or two more if anyone wants this question.
I have a question regarding education. You mentioned that you taught for a while.
Mm-hmm.
What would you
Love teaching.
Would you refer some programs for people that are really passionate about social enterprise, that we can learn more about it, frameworks, because there's not a lot out there?
Sure. I think that it's great to, so I can definitely give examples of programs in social enterprise. And I can say also that it's, again, not to beat a dead horse, but it's really interdisciplinary work. And so I think it really depends on like, what skill set do you most want to nurture and hone as a leader of your social enterprise, right? And for me, it was design. I think now kind of for obvious reasons. But I think it really depends because again, like you can't learn everything. So I can say that. So doesn't necessarily have to literally be a social enterprise program for you to succeed as a social entrepreneur, I guess is the point I'm making. But I think when there are sort of social aspects baked into any kind of field or discipline that you are pursuing, of course it's an added bonus, and that was the case for me. So when I went to Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, I found a program that was focused on design, which is what they're known for, but also had a focus on public policy. And so we talked a lot about social impact and social good. And it was a really diverse group of people. It was an executive program, so everyone was there having, had experience out there as, people running their own businesses or people working already out there sort of in the world. And trying to, gain a new skill set or look at things through a new lens. In terms of social enterprise, there's some really great short-term programs, and there's also some amazing graduate programs out there. It's incredible to see. Literally, I can say that as I was scouring, any resources that I could, the internet, everything, my network, probably even 10 years ago, it felt like there was nothing. It felt like I was pursuing something, and I was constantly why am I doing this? There's clearly nothing out there for me. And now you look and it's just right? It's like a buzzword. It's that's what I think even it's become something that actually really attracts people who otherwise maybe, wouldn't even look. So it's really, really come a long way. I'm happy to share specifics with you. I don't know which ones you know, but
I have one.
Yeah, please, yeah.
So Acumen Plus.
Yeah.
They have, you're familiar, yeah. So they have amazing social enterprise courses online that are taught by professors from Stanford, and it's all free. So.
Yeah, and I would say actually, in that vein, definitely go that route in terms of the sort of mass open online courses or whatever MOOC stands for. Yeah, I think that's a really great starting point. I did that and it was really helpful. Yeah.
And this isn't necessarily education, but Natalie, do you want to talk about some of the resources that we have available for social entrepreneurship?
That's really, I'm glad you mentioned that. So the first one I want to mention is the Startup Series Social Enterprise category. We had our first social enterprise pitch category last year. We were a little bit nervous when we launched it. We didn't know if anyone was going to apply or if we would have enough for it to be very competitive. And we actually ended up getting more applications than we did for any other category last year. We had 30, and it was a really cool experience for me to get to see so many different people who are using business principles to solve social issues in our community. So that's the first one I'll mention. And then second, I will mention Kiva Tulsa. Ibada mentioned access to capital as being her major hurdle.
Kiva was big for my business, so yeah, definitely thumbs up for Kiva.
Cool, yeah. So that's another program of the foundation as well, and you can receive up to $10,000 with a 0% interest rate. I think 36 Degrees North is an amazing resource as well. Trying to think of it. I think the United Way Social Innovation Grants are also something to look into for people who are interested in launching a social enterprise. Those are the three main ones I can think of right now.
Yeah, and in terms of if you're thinking academics or really going that route, there's amazing programs out there, in terms of graduate programs. NYU has an amazing social enterprise center. We engage with them a lot. And through Stern, their business school, and also through the Social Enterprise Center, which are separate, but working together. And American University also has an amazing social enterprise program. I feel like more and more, even if they're not specifically programs, there are centers or labs at most universities and colleges.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's just so prevalent now, incubators out there. So again, happy to share a list via email or something like that.
If you are interested in, or anyone interested in the social enterprise category of Tulsa Startup Series. That will be in July of this year is when we'll open applications for that. And I know I mentioned at the beginning that there are some social enterprises that are set up in the back there, and Juju Project, who's in the back, they pitched last year a really incredible pitch at the social enterprise category. And actually both Juju Project and Our Troops Consignment are also Kiva loan recipients. And then of course Take Two Cafe, which is a residence project, has been around forever and just a really great example of a successful social enterprise in Tulsa. So I would encourage you guys as as we wrap up in a few minutes to really take advantage and talk to them about what the social enterprise landscape looks like in Tulsa and the resources that they have been able to leverage and use to start their businesses. And we could do one more question.
What would be some advice that you have for people that want to start social enterprise in another country, like in regards of like creating a new like contact list and finding investors and just like a whole new culture and stuff? Like, what was your experience in Peru and everything?
That's a really good question. My experience was complex. Working with government leaders in a foreign country. To export product on time, for example, but also just to provide resources that they weren't providing to the community that I worked in. For example, as many times as I was also at, the hangar trying to get the product out, I was also at the Ministry of Health telling them that they needed to fumigate our workshop because women were getting dengue. So it was and that's what I mean by being in the trenches. I think it's really important to, again, be thoughtful about the partnerships that you're going to create, and use your best skill sets to do what you can, and then also lean on others. Excuse me. I can say that also I looked for partners and resources in the U.S., in the communities that I was most familiar with, who had existing relationships there. And that was really important. So not to start totally from scratch. There was an incredible organization called Nest that was, connecting artisans, businesses with, customers, clients all over the world. And so I was able to work with them a little bit. I was able to, again, go to one of my mentors, who's an amazing woman at Parsons, the New School for Design, is originally from Colombia, so she was able to connect me with people in the region and also just really offer really good advice about how to work with government, just based on her personal experience and her background and upbringing. And so that was also really helpful. And to have her on our board really added credibility and created trust. So again, that was a really important human element. So I would say trust is huge, and I could have a long conversation about that, but hopefully we'll get to talk about that more tomorrow if you're coming to the workshop for design thinking. So ensuring that you have those relationships is, I think, really, really important, because you need the community to trust you for the business to succeed. That's key.
Actually, do we have time for one more? Or?
Sure.
Okay. Is
Let's
there
go
one
for
more
it.
question? Oh, yeah, right there. Okay.
So you talk about making a product that is attractive, and you also talk about focusing on the American of the South, which will be your target market, and you also have that social enterprise angle. Which one came first? I know the social part is kind of your passion, but what came second, I guess?
That's a really good question. What did come first? Product, always. Yeah, it was all about the product. And then sort of the resources of how am I going to make this product. Wasn't an idea of it wasn't a concept that I had in my mind of a product specifically that I wanted to create. I just knew the kind of product that I wanted to create. And then, like I said earlier, did a lot of exploratory exercises to understand what was available. So definitely the product. I think the social was just baked in there based on my experience. I was going to Peru. I knew there was a social element. So I would say probably those two things simultaneously. But the product motivated me to go. You know, I went to Italy. I said, you know, all right, this is going to be my life's work. Like, I know this is what I need to do, and it was the product that drove me there. So I would say yes, product, and then probably social. And what was the third one you mentioned?
Your target market.
Yeah, the target market definitely was later. And it's not even something that I necessarily I would probably say to do that differently. But it worked out after failing a few times, you know. Definitely would say, like, identify your target audience. But I think I kind of had like a rough idea in my mind also from the beginning. Like, I knew I was dealing with a customer who wanted a luxury product, but it's very different to think about who that person is. You know, for example, okay, are they cosmopolitan? Like, are they middle-aged living in New York City? Are they like a farmer who just doesn't want to buy a hat for 10 years working in North Carolina? And I wanted the farmer, so yeah.
She wanted the farmer.
I wanted the
That's
farmer.
That's the last word.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Ibada, so much for being here for this conversation.
Yeah.
And we had a sold-out design thinking workshop tomorrow, and we're going to probably continue to offer them, so you'll have to sign up quick. So we'll give Ibada a round of applause now, and then we'll have a couple more announcements.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Natalie.
We have a really big cake in the back that Kathy wants to talk about for a second.
First of all, thank you for getting up early and being with us today. And I also want to say thanks to the Tulsa Global Alliance. I know we have a number of international social entrepreneurs with us. I know from Morocco and from the Czech Republic,
Very cool.
from Lebanon and other countries. I haven't met each of you, but welcome. We're glad you're here this evening.
That's great.
But we're glad your schedule aligned to be here today because February 15th is a day that my daughter and I have celebrated every year. She's the CEO of our foundation, Elizabeth Ellison. And today is Susan B. Anthony's birthday.
Yay!
98 years ago brought us the women's right to vote. I hope each of you exercise it every time you have the chance. But in honor of her 198th birthday, her cake is behind us, and I hope that you'll share it with us and celebrate people of passion that make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, let's go break the cake.
Sounds great. Thanks.